Good day, and welcome to this week's lecture in the series, The Middle East on the Move, Forwards or Backwards. Last week, we focused our political review and analysis on the Islamic Republic of Iran. If we were to predict the trajectory of the Middle East, if Iran had anything to do with it, it looks like it's headed backwards. Although you never know in the Middle East, things may change quickly and abruptly. In today's lecture, we focus our lens on the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, which, as we will see, will play a starring role in moving the Middle East forward. Throughout this lecture series, I keep referring to a Middle East Union, modeled after the European Union, as the potential forward configuration of the Middle East, including Israel, the Palestinians, and the Sunni Arab nations. For a while, I was ready to take credit for offering an original solution to end the Middle East conflicts and focus on regional cooperation and collaboration within the framework of a Middle East Union. My Middle East skeptics would have disagreed, but my optimism received a boost when I heard something similar from Mohammed bin Salman, MBS, the 36-year-old Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia.
أنا أعتقد أن أوروبا الجديدة هي الشرق الأوسط. المملكة العربية السعودية في ال5 سنوات القادمة سوف تكون مختلفة تماما. البحرين سوف تكون مختلفة تماما. الكويت حتى قطر على خلافنا معهم لديهم اقتصاد قوي سوف تكون مختلفة تماما بعد 5 سنوات. الإمارات، عمان، لبنان، الأردن، مصر، العراق والفرص التي لديها. إذا نجحنا في ال5 سنوات القادمة سوف تلتحق فينا دول أكثر وسوف تكون النهضة القادمة في العالم في 30 سنة القادمة في الشرق الأوسط إن شاء الله. هذه حرب السعوديين، هذه حربي اللي أخوضها شخصيا، ولا أريد أن أفارق الحياة إلا وأرى الشرق الأوسط في مقدمة مصاف في العالم، وأعتقد أن هذا الهدف سوف يتحقق 100%.
الله يعطيك طول العمر يا سيدي.
As we said before, Saudi Arabia is the spiritual, if not the political leader of the Sunni Arab world. It, more than any Arab state, can influence the meaningful end of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, for example, especially if and when, as is predicted, it will join the Gulf states in normalizing relations with Israel. It should be noted that cooperation between Israel and Saudi Arabia in the areas of technology and security has been going on under the radar for some time. For Saudi Arabia to realize MBS's Vision 2030 will largely depend on formalizing and normalizing and expanding regional cooperation, especially with Israel. So our agenda for today's lecture will focus on the 6 need-to-know items, which, as you will see, is driven by the 3 words: oil, waterways, and religion. Once again, a look at this map demonstrates the geographical, topographical, and thus political and strategic importance of the Saudi kingdom in changing the status quo in the region. Before we embark on our Saudi journey, and as a refresher, let us be reminded again about the modern history of the Desert Kingdom. Saudi Arabia is the cradle of Islam, the birthplace of the Prophet Muhammad, and the custodian of the two most important Islamic religious sites in Mecca and Medina. Religion plays a monumental role more than in any other Arab state in the region. In fact, the House of Saud made a pact with the religious clerics to maintain and foster the religious, ultra-conservative doctrine of Wahhabism for the masses, while the kingdom controls all other aspects of the state, economic, political, both foreign and domestic, and above all, the management of Saudi Arabia's treasure trove, oil. Therefore, Wahhabism and its origins and influence are key to understanding, let alone predicting, the future of Saudi Arabia and thus the region.
Peace be upon you. This is how Muslims greet each other around the world. The ideal society almost all Muslims strive for is, as the Quran puts it, Dar as-Salam, literally the house of peace. According to Islam, we are working toward a time of security, abundance, peace, brotherhood, and well-being across all of humanity. Muslims believe that Jesus is the Messiah and that together with his return, all of humanity from all religions will be saved from chaos, war, conflicts, racial and ethnic hostility, and cruelty. So, if that is the beliefs of 99% of the 1.6 billion Muslims across the globe, how can the members of groups like ISIS claim to be speaking for the Muslim world? Because they get their beliefs from Wahhabism. What is Wahhabism? It's an ultra-conservative, ultra-orthodox, socio-political religious movement founded in the 18th century by a student named Mohammed ibn Abdul Wahhab, based on the teachings of Ibn Taymiyyah, a man who's called a fanatic by some, whose teachings were rejected by many religious leaders and teachers of the time. Wahhab, who studied Ibn Taymiyyah's teachings, believed that Islamic practices and the religion itself needed to be purified, that those not practicing those versions of Islam set out by Ibn Taymiyyah's teachings should be killed. In order to spread his views, Mohammed ibn Abdul Wahhab needed political backing. In 1746, he found that alliance with Muhammad ibn Saud. Through this alliance, and with weapons from the British, they were able to create the first Saudi government, which eventually grew into the powerhouse that is now modern-day Saudi Arabia. So how exactly does Wahhabism differ from other forms of Islam? Well, it rejects and prohibits things like honoring individual personality, birthdays of oneself, or the birthdays of those honored religious figures. Honoring of a person's death is looked down upon. They're rejecting visiting graves, building shrines that are either whether they're Islamic, Jewish, or Christian. They reject visiting holy places and any analyzation or rational interpretation of the Quran, a key part of Islam. They believe that anyone who does not follow their distinct, extreme brand of Islam is not worthy of Islam, that their belongings, their land, and their very lives are to be conquered and stolen, which is why simply calling groups like ISIS Islamic extremists is not only unfair, but incorrect. They do not get their beliefs from the teachings of Islam any more than Warren Jeffs and his fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, who believe in polygamy and forced child brides, get theirs from the Mormon Church. According to the head of the World Islamic League in London, Syed Mohammed Musawi, said this: in fact, Wahhabism is the origin, is the mother of all of these terrorist groups. Much like those who follow a strict literal interpretation of the Bible, Wahhabism ignores the intellectual. It ignores the individual, which are the root of these violent extremists, not Islam. Wahhabism in the hands of groups like ISIS works on the very idea that conflating the two religions and destroying any other form of Islam in the world along with all other religions is fair. They believe it is their duty, and they are using the extremist, violent, and quite un-Islamic religion of Wahhabism to justify it. And with centuries-old roots in Saudi Arabia, it financially behooves ISIS to follow Wahhabism and its teachings of pure, material domination. Peace be upon you.
The script on the left side of the chart illustrates how harsh, uncompromising, and you might say evil is the Salafi Wahhabi doctrine of Islam in Saudi Arabia. In fact, it is on the basis of this so-called theological principle that terror organizations like Al-Qaeda and ISIS got their inspiration. Now, you need to know that while only 40% of Saudis consider themselves Wahhabis, they still represent a very dominant minority of some 17 million people. Mind you, the majority is also religious and ultra-conservative, if not as radical as Wahhabis. As in all autocratic regimes, Saudi Arabia is also run by a strongman. Yet a young 36-year-old crown prince by the name of Mohammed bin Salman, known generally as MBS, who is the son of the present king of Saudi Arabia, an 86-year-old King Salman. For those of you who are interested and willing to spend more time and insights into the making of the new Saudi Arabia by the Crown Prince, you may want to watch the 2 hours episode of PBS's Frontline documentary. The link to this episode is at the bottom of this slide. If you wish to do so, feel free to pause the video at this point and copy or screen grab or take a picture of the screen using your smartphone for future reference. As of this time, it is safe to say that wherever MBS is taking Saudi Arabia, that's where Saudi Arabia goes. As you will see, the contradictory forces of ultra-conservative religious doctrines and the crying need, mainly from the young population, who 36-year-old MBS mainly represents, for social and religious reforms and modernization, are in constant battle in the kingdom.
Reforms have always been controversial in Saudi Arabia. Every time the king enacts a reform, he risks losing the support of conservatives. In the last decade, Saudi Arabia has tried to break free from this constraint. It has expanded voting rights, opened cinemas, permitted women to drive. But institutional reforms have always been missing. King Salman is looking to address this problem now. He's ordered reforms in 3 key religious and administrative institutions of the kingdom. Our next report tells you more.
Saudi Arabia's king is walking a fine line. The winds of change are blowing across his kingdom. A reformist crown prince is waiting in the wings. Conservative clerics are following his every move. They are keen to rein him in. But in this fast-changing world, reforms are inevitable. And the Saudi king realizes this. He issued a series of orders on Sunday. 3 Saudi institutions are to be reformed: the Shura Council, the Supreme Court, and the Council of Senior Scholars. The Shura Council functions like a parliament. But this being Saudi Arabia, the members are appointed, not elected. And all final decisions are taken by the king. The new appointees include a speaker and 2 deputies, one of them a woman. Women were first allowed to join the Shura Council in 2013. By October 2017, they made up 20% of the council. 150 members are part of the new Shura Council. They begin their 4-year term later this week. The king also ordered reformation of Saudi Arabia's top religious body, the Council of Senior Scholars. It is headed by Grand Mufti Sheikh Abdulaziz Al Sheikh. The council advises the king on religious matters. The Grand Mufti looks at the new reforms with apprehension. He is opposed to concerts, cinemas, and even chess tournaments. The council was long overdue for reforms, but the order does not reveal what changes will be made. With this restructuring, King Salman is hoping to placate the kingdom's conservatives. But it also puts him on a collision course with the clergy. The Wahhabi Saudi Pact is the source of the kingdom's stability. The Crown Prince's reforms have already alienated the clerics. A decoupling between the two could endanger the House of Saud. The people want reforms, systemic change that starts at the top. For this, Saudi Arabia's archaic governing bodies need to be reformed, and King Salman has taken the first step. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Thank you for watching Gravitas on WION's YouTube channel. If you want to stay up to date with what's happening around the world, then subscribe to our channel and don't forget to like and share. Thank you very much for watching WION, World is One.
As you can see, MBS, who since his anointment as the heir apparent to the Saudi crown, has begun a sweeping set of reforms coupled with frankly brutal suppression of any sign of opposition within the country, the clerics, and especially from within the royal family. So this now is the billion or maybe even the trillion-dollar question. Can MBS break the Saudi Wahhabi Pact that governed domestic policies for 250 years in Saudi Arabia? Experts say cautiously and respectfully that out of respect to his father King Salman, who represents the older, more conservative generation of the House of Saud, he may not. Same may be true for normalizing relations with Israel, although he has much more freedom and authority to operate. King Salman is 86 years old and not altogether with it, so it may be a question of when rather than if. For those Middle East pessimists who thrive on bad news and dire predictions, Saudi Arabia's MBS is an enigma. Here is the head of the spiritual leader of the Arab Sunni world openly and genuinely recognizes the right of the Jewish state of Israel to exist, likely the most significant Arab pronouncement since the 1970s peace agreement between Egypt and later on Jordan and Israel. One that is critical to the realization of MBS ambitions for a new Saudi Arabia.
Is the Saudi crown prince emboldening an occupier? In a recent interview with The Atlantic, Mohammed bin Salman says Palestinians and the Israelis have the right to have their own land. Riyadh has supported the two-state solution since 2002, but this is the first time a Saudi leader has explicitly recognized that Jews have the right to their own homeland.
أولا هذا التصريح يثبت ما كنا نردده بأن هناك علاقات سرية بين الحكومة السعودية أو النظام السعودي سابقا وإسرائيل. الآن انكشف لكم محمد بن سلمان على حقيقته وانكشف لكم النظام السعودي على حقيقته.
Saudi Arabia has introduced various steps towards the possible cooperation between the GCC and Israel, and recently opened up its airspace for the first time to a commercial flight to Israel. But why is this such a big deal? Well, Israel and Saudi Arabia have mutual interests, one of which is containing Iran's growing influence in the Middle East. Israel and Iran have been arch rivals for the past 3 decades, while Saudi Arabia severed its ties with Iran in 2016 after its diplomatic mission in Tehran was set on fire by local protesters. Saudi's overtures towards Israel come at a time when Tel Aviv has unleashed deadly violence against Palestinians. Amid its expansion of illegal settlements, human rights abuses, and siege of Gaza, will Saudi continue normalizing its relations with Israel?
So what's holding MBS Saudi Arabia from joining the normalization of relationship with Israel? The answer lies in the concern for populist backlash driven by the clerics who still have significant influence on most Saudis. The balancing of economic and social reforms, popular with the young generation symbolized by MBS, with the ultra-conservative nature of the older population, may prematurely destabilize the kingdom. Populist uprising has been the main, if not the only, threat to the Saudi monarchy, which it managed to avoid through fiscal benefits and perks to the population at large, maintaining conservative religious practices for the clerics, and enriching the royal family from oil revenues. This equation may not be possible for much longer. Hence the hesitation. In my opinion, it is only a matter of time. Listen to the next video reporting on MBS's grand vision.
The UAE, Bahrain and Israel's formalisation of diplomatic relations has left many analysts speculating whether Saudi Arabia will also normalise its relations with Tel Aviv. Shortly after the UAE and Israel signed their US brokered deal, Saudi Arabia clarified that Riyadh will not normalise ties with the Jewish state until and unless a Palestinian state is established. King Salman and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman cannot ignore certain domestic and regional factors which would make normalisation risky for Saudi Arabia's rulers. The Saudi leadership fears the potential for protests and a clerical revolt to result from any deal between Riyadh and Tel Aviv, which is premature. At this sensitive juncture, in which the kingdom is coping with low oil prices, the Yemen war, and COVID-19, the Saudi monarchy does not want to take such risks involving Israel, giving the potential for domestic unrest. Regionally, the Al Saud rulers do not want to provide Turkey an opportunity to further challenge the kingdom's religious legitimacy and position as a leader in the wider Islamic world. At the same time, Riyadh fears how Iran could capitalise on any deal between Saudi Arabia and Israel to inflict further harm on the royal family's image before Arabs and Muslims across the globe. As the King of Saudi Arabia is officially the custodian of the two holy mosques, Riyadh understands the responsibilities that come with this title. Nonetheless, because Bahrain defers to Saudi Arabia on all sensitive foreign policy issues, it is safe to conclude that Riyadh gave Manama the green light to normalise Bahraini-Israeli relations. In essence, this can be interpreted as Saudi Arabia slowly abandoning the Arab Peace Initiative and using Bahrain as a test case for navigating the waters as more Arab states move in the direction of formalised relations with the Jewish state.
The Saudi Arabia appears to be a nation in a hurry, making up for lost time as it was pushing social change. That was long overdue. You may question his motive and timing, but you cannot dispute the fact that Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is leading a bold reform push. He has had some success, but clerics and dissenters continue to resist his grand vision. Here is a report.
A jazz concert in Riyadh. Not too long ago, an event like this was unthinkable in Saudi Arabia. But last week, the country held its first ever jazz festival. In the coming years, Saudi Arabia wants to spend billions of dollars to overhaul its entertainment sector. The money would go towards building venues like these and flying in more pop stars to perform in the kingdom. Saudi Arabia was known for its ultra-conservative reforms, but winds of change have now begun to blow. And driving this change is Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. His sudden elevation last year was a surprise move, something that broke away from the family tradition of power sharing. Nicknamed MBS, Mohammed bin Salman wants to radically turn around Saudi Arabia by implementing what he calls the Vision 2030. The Crown Prince wants to shift Saudi Arabia's dependence on oil for revenues. He's pushing for privatization in major sectors like finance, infrastructure, health and education. Movie theatres have cropped up for the first time in the kingdom as the Crown Prince sees entertainment and tourism as a new source of revenue for the country. To meet the aspirations of a young population, bin Salman wants to bring more contributing citizens into the economy. One big step is relaxing religious restrictions, especially on women. Bin Salman's first move towards that was the much-publicized move to allow women to drive in the country. Female football fans are also allowed inside stadiums now. Women were banned from stadiums until last year. The plans are ambitious, but many experts feel that the reform measures are yet another attempt to consolidate power. Last year, bin Salman jailed political rivals and detained dissenting clerics. Political reforms still continue to take a back seat in the kingdom. King Abdullah introduced municipal elections and appointed women to the Shura Council during his lifetime. The political power continues to stay in the hands of royals. Bureau Report, WION.
These are not just visions of the future. The train is already out of the station. MBS discovered that turning Saudi Arabia into an entertainment juggernaut is not only good for the younger generation, but is an easy, fast, and potentially lucrative source of state revenues at the time of declining oil revenues and the decline of global fossil energy demand in the face of climate change. The Saudi Disney World Qiddiya is becoming a reality and regional drawing card for regional tourists. All the while, the American entertainment industry is salivating over the prospects of generating huge revenues from a Western entertainment-deprived society in Saudi Arabia. But this is only the beginning. MBS, backed by King Salman, has presented to the Saudi nation and the rest of the world what is known as Vision 2030. It is an almost revolutionary in its scope and timing to transform Saudi Arabia into a vibrant society with a thriving economy and make it an ambitious nation.
It's a country famous for its endless golden sands and vast riches built on one natural resource, oil. But as the world begins to wean itself off this valuable fossil fuel, it's forcing a monumental shift in the sands.
Saudi Arabia is a country on the move. Things are changing here so rapidly in the way that people live and work. The country is trying to diversify its economy away from just oil. And this is a big part of it. This is Digital City. A couple of years ago, these buildings weren't here. This is part of the country's drive to move into technologies and in particular into cybersecurity. There are big ambitions here to create household names in information security, and across Riyadh, another sign of intent. This place is amazing. It's like Buckingham Palace with palm trees. For the first time ever, the government's hosting a global cybersecurity forum. By throwing open the doors to foreign visitors, Saudi Arabia is inviting investment, collaboration, and scrutiny. What's funny about this conference, this cybersecurity conference, it's not a conference, it's a forum. There are no stands. We don't know who's here, which companies, but that's not to say there aren't companies here. There are companies from all over the world. People are chatting, deals are being struck, introductions are being made.
It's predicted that Saudi's cybersecurity market could grow to $5.5 billion by 2023. But there's another motivation, a devastating attack that the country is still reeling from.
2012 Shamoon attack was a massive moment. It was the moment when tens of thousands of PCs at the country's biggest company, this is Saudi Aramco, the world's biggest oil producer, they went dark.
They were hit by what we call a wiper virus. And what that does is, as the name implies, it basically deletes all the files on all the computers wherever it's infected. Imagine if you will, it's a bit like someone breaking into your house, and not only do they steal everything, but they burn your house on their way out.
The hack, which has been blamed on Iran, took out 30,000 PCs.
This spread or got into the company by someone receiving an email and they double-clicked on the attachment. From a cyber perspective, it really turned the dynamic on its head. We were thinking about, you know, the stereotypical, you think of some genius in a basement somewhere using all these commands. Whereas actually now what we see is very, very simple. It's an email that comes through, there's a link in there, and as long as you can trick the person into clicking that link or opening that file, you can have a very, very big impact through that.
Since then, the country's been under almost constant attack. No wonder the country is on a mission to improve its cyber defence and encourage local talent to flourish.
Saudi Arabia was ranked 47 among 179 countries, according to the ITU, which is the International Telecommunication Union under the UN. Throughout the last couple of years, that ranking has increased to be 13 globally and number 1 on the Arab world.
So we have seen Saudi actually increasing, the ranking in a sense, because the ranking is directly linked to the level of commitment, the level of effort that the country is putting into cyber.
And here's one way the country's hoping to rise further up the ranks. This is a hacker training exercise run by Sight, a government-backed cybersecurity company. The teams are trying to capture a digital flag inside a secured server.
So you're basically pretending to be hackers, or you are hackers, but
you're
trying to break into a system.
Yeah, we try to log into the system and try to find where's the hashes. Capture the flag will make you challenge yourself. How could you pass the WAF, the firewall, the login credentials, and a lot of cybersecurity controls.
Staying ahead of hackers is very tough, because technology advancement and the pace of technology advancement is way fast, is way higher than the advancement that we see in cyberspace.
Amongst all the positivity here, and there is a lot of positivity, there's also an unspoken truth. Many of the people I've been speaking to, the international guests, have decided not to bring their devices, laptops and phones. This one isn't my usual phone. And the reason for that is there's a concern about potential surveillance.
Last month, Amazon boss Jeff Bezos accused Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince of hacking his phone.
He received a file via WhatsApp. It was a video file, and upon clicking that, opening that, that infected his phone with a backdoor that allowed someone to siphon off all his data.
The kingdom says the allegation is absurd. However, according to the United Nations, there's also strong indications that Saudi Arabia hacked the phone of dissident journalist Jamal Khashoggi before he was killed in the Saudi embassy in Turkey in 2018. It all raises questions, which I put to the government's cyber division.
How do you think Saudi Arabia is going to go forward and respond to issues around surveillance?
So, as I have mentioned earlier, our main focus is basically how we ensure that we defend and ensure that we protect our critical national infrastructure with putting the right measurements, whether it's from standardization, building our capabilities, and also enhancing our cyber resilience efforts.
Saudi is clearly trying to move on from uncomfortable allegations. The conference is a major part of this, and the centrepiece of the event shows an emphasis again on defence, a game that puts players in the hot seat of an attack.
So you're an IT specialist,
okay,
and you're representing a petrochemical plant.
Yeah.
So we're going to go through the whole phase of an attack.
So we've obviously got employees and they've downloaded bad files with malware. We need to stop more employees from downloading it.
Correct.
And we've run out of time. Oh no!
Saudi Arabia is at a crossroads. It's opening up to the world, and it's clear it wants to be a big player on the global cybersecurity stage. It would be naive to think that other nations don't hack for security or economic reasons. But an emerging force like Saudi has to decide whether it can be seen as a team player or be kept at arm's length.
We're almost there.
Hey!
So you take that.
Well done.
Here we go.
Easy click. There we go.
The scale, scope, and pace of Vision 2030 is not without its enormous challenges. MBS is running the show by bypassing state institutions traditionally in charge of such initiatives. Time is of the essence in MBS's mind, and the conservative, lethargic pace of state institutions is not the answer. This is a serious challenge and a potential obstacle that MBS is determined to overcome. Several of Crown Prince's MBS statements and initiatives calling for moderate Islam, authorizing women to drive, reopening cinemas, have been interpreted as his desire to break the historic pact between the House of Saud and the Wahhabi religious establishment. Prince Mohammed is unlikely to pull off a break with the Wahhabi religious establishment because the clerics have proved to be resilient and have displayed a great capacity to adapt to transitions and vagaries of power. Attempts to marginalize the clerics date back to the early 20th century. Integral to the realization of Vision 2030 is Saudi Arabia's intent to lead the fight against climate change, not only because of the potential disastrous consequences of global warming and water scarcity most acute in the Desert Kingdom, but because it is designated as the future industry to ultimately replace the total reliance on oil revenues. It offers opportunities for technology innovation, which is where Israel cooperation and collaboration may be a prerequisite. It creates opportunities for the young, largely unemployed population, and it places Saudi Arabia in a leadership position as a modern state in the region, a position presently occupied by Israel and to a lesser degree by the United Arab Emirates. If they can do it, so can still oil-rich Saudi Arabia. All of this will significantly, if not frantically, require intense urbanization to accommodate the new industries, technology hubs, techno-savvy workforce, and alleviate the near-exploding density in cities like the capital Riyadh. Imagine $500 billion are invested in a new city of Neom. It is being developed as we speak to become a model of urbanization for the world, with the advantage of a from-scratch planning and implementing. It's going to be the future smart city, Neom, in the middle of the desert.
Imagine a place that provides everything your business needs to break boundaries. A curated landscape of advanced industry that closes the loop and drives circularity. To create a clean energy system, minimizing waste and maximizing output, where you can swap disposable for renewable. This is Oxygen. Thanks to state-of-the-art robotics, AI, machine learning, and other game-changing technologies, this is the place where manufacturing is being transformed, resulting in new levels of efficiency and unlimited possibilities. Through advanced manufacturing methods, we'll create green industries of the future with sustainability and reusability built into their DNA. Because any business destined to change the world must also protect it. A leading hub for research and innovation will bring the brightest minds together to solve the world's greatest challenges, accelerating ideas from labs to market and attracting top talent to be part of a vibrant ecosystem. Oxagon will be home to the world's first fully automated port and integrated logistics hub, with a regulatory framework to promote faster, seamless trade across the globe. It will comprise the world's largest floating structure, creating a new paradigm for living and working on water, and an oceanographic institute for pioneering marine research, so we can best protect the pristine waters of the Red Sea and beyond. This is a cognitive city that not only adapts to your needs, but will learn to anticipate them, redefining tasks so that you can focus on the things that matter. A place with unrivaled livability, where people, industry, and technology come together in harmony with nature. This is the place where ideas can change the world. This is Oxagon.
So with a frantic forward pace of developments in Saudi Arabia, what could potentially go wrong and turn the tide? The ultra-conservative clerics, the traditional state institutions, the population at large? None of the above. It is only the intensifying of the power struggle between Shia Iran and Sunni Saudi Arabia as hegemonic contenders for the Islamic world.
Saudi Arabia and Iran have been waging proxy wars for regional dominance for decades. This rivalry has dragged the region into chaos and ignited Sunni-Shia conflict across the Middle East. Animosity between the two countries have been sharpened by a series of events, from the war in Syria and Yemen to the trial of strength in Iraq and Lebanon. But were Iran and Saudi Arabia always enemies? Before 1979, Iran and Saudi Arabia shared good diplomatic ties, as both countries were governed by Western-backed monarchs. This is the Shah of Iran, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, visiting Saudi Arabia in 1978. Months later, everything changed. The root of the conflict lies in the 1979 Iranian Revolution, which saw the pro-Western monarch Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi toppled and replaced by Ayatollah Khomeini.
There was a triumphant and tumultuous welcome in Tehran today by more than 1 million Iranians for the Ayatollah Khomeini, returning home from 15 years of exile.
The return of Khomeini marked a turning point in the Saudi-Iranian relationship. The Saudi regime, the self-proclaimed leader of the Sunni world, was alarmed by the presence of an Islamic revolution in the region. Khomeini openly opposed the idea of a monarchy as un-Islamic, drawing parallels between the Saudi monarch and the Shah of Iran. He was also hostile towards Western-backed governments, particularly those backed by the US, which is an important ally for the Saudis. In 1980, a CIA report revealed that Iran was attempting to export the Islamic revolution to neighboring countries. The fear of the spread of the Iranian Revolution triggered a series of events. In Qatif, home to Saudi Arabia's Shia majority, protesters took to the streets calling for reform while raising pictures of Khomeini. The protests led to a violent crackdown by security forces, killing at least 20 people and arresting hundreds. The GCC was created as an alliance between 6 Gulf monarchies. It was a unified regional political and security front against the perceived Iranian threat. 2 years into the Iran-Iraq war, Saudi Arabia decided to provide military and financial support to Saddam Hussein, in a move that further escalated tensions between Tehran and Riyadh. The Iraqi president had invaded Iran over fears the country's Shia majority would be influenced by Khomeini's revolution. Mecca became a site of unprecedented violence when Iranian pilgrims held anti-US demonstrations. This led to clashes with Saudi security forces, resulting in a stampede that killed at least 400 people. Following the events in Mecca, Saudi Arabia suspended its relations with Iran for 3 years. Over the next few decades, relations between the two countries had its share of ups and downs. But the 2011 Arab Spring changed the geopolitical dynamics, with a fight for dominance in the Middle East reaching a new level. During the Arab Spring, both countries supported opposing sides in regional conflicts. Iran openly spoke in support of the revolutions in Tunisia, Egypt, and Bahrain, countries that were run by Sunni dictators who shared favorable relations with Saudis. The two powerhouses were also on opposing sides when the revolution reached Syria. But this time, Saudi Arabia backed the opposition and Iran allied with the regime. Syria's Bashar al-Assad was always an important ally for Iran. He's from a minority Shia sect and rules over a majority Sunni state. So Iran wants to keep the Syrian regime in power at all costs. Since 2011, it has been supporting the Syrian regime with weapons, ground troops and training. Saudi Arabia, on the other hand, continues to back the rebels and military defectors. 7 years later, the proxy war has had devastating effects on civilians, with 6 million Syrians displaced, 5 million refugees and more than 500,000 killed. Saudi Arabia's attempt to curb Iran's influence in Syria has failed so far, as the regime still controls most of the country. Then there is Yemen, where the Saudi-led coalition is engaged in a bitter fight against Iranian-backed Houthi rebels, who are Shias. This has drawn the country towards the world's largest humanitarian crisis. Tens of thousands of people have been killed since the start of the conflict, and more than 22 million Yemenis are in need of humanitarian assistance. While Iran supplies the Houthi rebels with weapons, Saudi Arabia has intervened direct with military action. They have launched more than 18,000 airstrikes and an imposed blockade, stopping critical aid from getting into the north of the country. While the Cold War between Iran and Saudi Arabia has adopted its most aggressive stance in Yemen, other countries have not been spared. In Iraq, Lebanon and Bahrain, the countries are playing a critical role by supporting governments and political players along sectarian lines. Although Iran and Saudi Arabia have never engaged in a direct confrontation, their proxy battle in the Middle East continues to escalate, further dividing the region. But can it be stopped?
Both countries, whether they admit it publicly or not, cannot afford, in the best interest of their own regime survival, to perpetuate their historic rivalry by taking opposite sides in regional civil wars, such as in Yemen, Syria, and Lebanon. Not only is it a drain on their economies and stress on the population, but more importantly, it stymies progress toward a better future for both and for the region. We will later in the series dedicate a lecture to the historic and present dynamics of these conflicts in Yemen, Syria, and the never-ending Israeli-Palestinian conflict. For now, it is at least encouraging that Iran is still talking to the world power about a return to the 2015 nuclear deal as a condition to removing the crippling economic sanctions, and that talks are taking place between Saudi Arabia and Iran aimed at achieving a state of détente that both countries desperately need in order to concentrate on their domestic priorities and, frankly, their regime's survival. Will it lead to forward or backward? At this time, and in the face of so many obstacles from pandemic to climate change to civil unrest in many of the Middle East countries, my outlook is still more optimistic in predicting that the Middle East has no other way than to march forward, the way we have described it. What gives me this optimism are some of the unprecedented events and declarations, including this one by a Saudi cleric advocating normalization relationships with Israel and promoting the natural interdependency and incentive to cooperate and collaborate between Israel and Saudi Arabia to advance their own selfish economic, environmental, and political strategic interest, as you will see in the next video.
قال تعالى وصاحبهما في الدنيا معروفا وقد توضأ صلى الله عليه وسلم من مزادة مشركة ومات ودرعه مرهونة عند يهودي وعامل يهود خيبر على الشطر مما يخرج من زروعهم وثمارهم وأحسن إلى جاره اليهودي مما كان سببا في إسلامه. وحين يغفل منهج الحوار الإنساني تذكى جوانب الصدام الحضاري وتسود لغة العنف والإقصاء والكراهية.
والله أول شيء يعني قرار البحرين هذا قرار سيادي يعني خاصها هي، وإن شاء الله يكون الاتفاقية هذه تساعد على السلام إن شاء الله بين الدول العربية وإسرائيل ونرتاح شوي من التجارة القضية.
هو صعب أنه في يوم وليلة طبعا بيصير اعتياد على الموضوع تطبيع هذا سواء من الشعب البحريني نفسه أو من الخليج والشرق الأوسط عموما، لأنه النفوس للحين فيها موضوع أن إسرائيل أصلا دولة محتلة ومطلعة الفلسطينيين من بيوتهم، فصعب الواحد زي ما تقول يعتاد على هذا الشيء في وقت قصير. يمكن في المستقبل ما أدري، مع أن أستبعد الشيء هذا.
With the King of Saudi Arabia. At the right time, I do think they will come in. Yes, I do. This is a very big and very historic moment, and I think everyone agrees to that. But we'll have other countries coming in fairly rapidly.
We know that there have been public meetings and probably not public meetings between Israeli former or current officials, Saudi officials. So this begs the question, for Israel, despite all the tensions at the official level, is maybe Saudi Arabia an objective ally in today's Middle East?
When you look at the five regional superpowers, Iran, Turkey, Israel, Egypt, and Saudi, 4 out of the 5 is concerned about Iran. When the Saudis expert for national security, or the Saudi defense minister, is waking up in the morning and he look at his problems, it's the threat on the Saudis. He looks at Iran with the hegemony the Iran want to achieve in the Middle East. He look at the nuclear ambitions of Iran. He look at the negative actions of Iran in Syria, in Iraq, in Yemen, in Lebanon. And he look at Hezbollah as a threat, and he look at ISIS as a threat. So when the defense minister in Israel is waking up in the morning, he basically sees the same threats. So this gives a lot of convergence interest that we can act upon. And I think, as you just stated, it is done below the radar screen. If there will be advance in the peace process with the Palestinians, I guess it can even go above the table.
One Iranian official, the Speaker of the Parliament, Ali Larijani, recently said that Israel and Saudi Arabia are cooperating, and back 10 years ago during the 2006 war with Hezbollah, he said Saudi Arabia provided strategic intelligence to Israel. You were in office at the time. Is that true?
I think many forces in the world, when in 2006 the Hezbollah terrorists kidnapped Israeli soldiers, wanted Israel to be very tough on Hezbollah. It was not only the Saudis. It was the Americans, some of the Europeans. All of them didn't like the fact that Iran using Hezbollah as a proxy in Lebanon, proxies that destabilize Lebanon, that at that time seems that go on the right track, according to 1559 UN Security Council resolution. So the fact that the Saudis were also supporting the fact that Hezbollah as a terror organization will be defeated is not a surprise.
If in fact the existential threats of climate change, the scarcity of vital resources like water and clean energy, and the ability to provide opportunities for education and employment to a presently deprived young population trump, no pun intended, traditional religious tribal grievances and conflicts, then the Middle East is on its way forward. The politics of Saudi normalization with Israel, an analysis by a Mideast expert who assesses if the Saudis could normalize relationships with Israel anytime soon. As the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain move forward with their separate processes to normalize relations with Israel, the question that seems to be on the mind of many, both in Washington and in the region, is whether or when the Saudis will follow. I've long argued, most recently here, that Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, MBS, the de facto ruler who is destined to govern the kingdom for decades to come, is hesitant to establish full diplomatic ties with Israel anytime soon, because doing so is likely to generate significant political cost at home. For starters, his father, King Salman, is committed to a comprehensive Arab-Israeli peace that includes the Palestinians and preserves the relevance and integrity of Riyadh's own Arab Peace Initiative of 2002, which called for Israel's complete withdrawal from Arab lands captured since 1967, in exchange for Arab recognition of Israel's right to exist and normalization of diplomatic ties. Then there is the ultra-Orthodox elements of the Saudi religious establishment who carry weight within a still largely conservative Saudi society. They are vehemently opposed to peace with a Jewish state that excludes the Palestinian and unjustly settles the fate of Jerusalem, Islam's third holiest site. If MBS ignores or alienates them, they can make things very difficult for him by undercutting what he cares about the most, his transformation plan for the country. MBS has to keep the fundamentalist sheiks at bay so he can proceed with his Vision 2030, which they are not that excited about because of its social reforms. So picking a huge fight with them over Israel might not be the smartest thing to do. There's also the violent Al-Qaeda types in the kingdom who, the moment they hear of Riyadh consenting to Muslim-Jewish peaceful coexistence, will lash out at the House of Saud, like they did in 1979 and then again 2003 and 2004. MBS has so seriously worry about those two. Last but not least, there's Iran and Turkey, who will viciously challenge Saudi Arabia global Muslim leadership and management of the religion's holiest mosque if it prematurely accepts the Jewish state, which is most iconic, or rather ironic, in the case of Ankara, since it has diplomatic relationships with Israel already since 1949.
Since the beginning, we've changed things. It's in our genes. It's what makes us human. Now we have a chance to change everything. Let's change water so it flows forever, energy so it powers our life sustainably, and mobility so cities become playgrounds. Let's change the way we feed the world, designed to live with nature, and create factories that make the future better. Let's change learning so it's lifelong, technology so it predicts our needs, And let's help prevent more illness that we need to cure. Let's change the way we think about money, how we explore the world around us, and how experiences come to life. This is where we can change it all. Neom, made to change.
The Prince Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia spoke about creating the future city very close to Aqaba, down south. And what we're saying, if innovation can change a country, maybe innovation can change a region. And one of the things that I'm telling him and other leaders across the region is, yalla, let's move. The leaders are hesitant, the entrepreneurs are bold. Let's create a process where we have 10 cities, 10 ideas, 10 projects that are going to change the way people look of not only what you have to give up, not divide the region into Arabs and Jews, but against extremists, against those that are willing to work together and be pragmatic. Time that we use technology in order to create the bridges to rethink Israel's position, not only in the world, which we do well, but also in the region. And I think you, people here, you are the ambassadors of change. Understand your role. Let's work together and let's move the industry forward and let's move the country forward. People are thirsty for new ideas.
Before we conclude this lecture, it is important to acknowledge that the Middle East is a serious topic and that our lectures may at times be intense. I hope that I didn't leave you with the wrong impression that Middle Eastern people, Saudi Arabian people in particular, are all serious and stern. Some of them, like in every place in the world, are really funny. So here is a relevant Saudi humor for your comic relief.
We have a very special guest for you this evening. He is a Middle Eastern prince who is here trying stand-up comedy for the first time. Please welcome to the stage, Prince Mahmoud.
It smells like middle class in here. Disgusting. This one especially, this one. Low income, very low income. That one over there, with the water, she can't even afford a drink. My name is Prince Mahmoud. It is a pleasure for you that I am here. Some of you is not laughing. I wanted to advise you to laugh. We don't want to start international conflict today. If I don't get standing ovation at the end, gasoline will be $45 a gallon tomorrow. I want to tell you my story. I have my best friend is a comedian. His name is Ja'far Denham. You might know him as Jeff Dunham. It's my favorite. He told me that I was very funny. I said, okay, I'll try stand-up comedy. We call it stand-up comedy back home. So he told me to do self-deprecation first. He said, you must attack yourself before you attack anything else. So this is my self-deprecation. So I am recently single. My fourth wife died in the car accident. All I want to say, if she was not allowed to drive, she would be here tonight. I don't want to say I told you so, but I told you so. She wanted to go to the movies. Was Adam Sandler worth it? Not very much. Second technique he taught me, he said, you must open to the people. You must be vulnerable. For that, I researched Nanette. I watched Nanette. I have a similar story to share. When I was 14, I asked my father for a Lamborghini. But instead, he gave me a Ferrari. It was very sad. My friends laugh at me. They call me Ferrari boy for 2 days. Nanette, thank you. This next material, I am not sure about. I don't want to bomb, so I will let my butler tell it. My butler will tell this joke.
What's the deal with my butler?
It's not about you.
He always asks me for his passport back.
He does.
Like I have a flight to catch or something. I hate that guy.
Baby, what's going on here? Fix. Embarrass me in front of my new friends. No, you can hold on. Thank you. There's another thing I learn about stand-up comedy is you must crowd work. You have to talk to the crowd, learn their answer, make it fun of themselves. What are you doing for a living? Research what? Brains? I got nothing for you. What is your name? James. James? What do you do for a living?
I'm a student.
You are a student. What kind of student?
I study journalism.
Journalism. Boys. We are giving him a scholarship. Free full ride to heaven.
Finally, I believe that the Middle East will return to its historical glory as a light to all nations. I hope that this will happen during my lifetime. Thank you for listening to the lecture and for your continuous interest in understanding the Middle East.